Hello and welcome to a special episode of The Rest is Football with me, Gary Lineker, Alan Shearer and Micah Richards. And when I say special, I mean it in so many ways, because on this episode, we'll be paying tribute to someone who was extraordinarily special to the game of football, to the clubs he played for and the clubs he coached and managed. During his tenure as our national team manager, he gave us special memories. And to both Alan and myself, he has a special place in our hearts and always will have, even though he's left us. It was devastating to hear that Terry Venables died this weekend at the age of 80. A fine footballer who played in midfield at Chelsea, Tottenham, Queen's Park Rangers and latterly at Crystal Palace. If my memory serves me correctly, he's the only player in this country to have played at every level of international football. England schoolboy, England youth, England amateur, England under-23s, Football League 11 and England. He was a gifted, intelligent footballer, but it was his coaching and managerial career which he truly excelled at. Starting at Crystal Palace, he then went to QPR, and such was his brilliance, one of the giants of football came calling. In Barcelona, the fans were, well, I think it's safe to say, somewhat bemused. They were incredulous. They didn't really know who he was, asking questions like, who is this English guy? They soon found out. He played a high-pressing game, long before the likes of Klopp, Guardiola, et al. They stormed to the La Liga title, smashing Real Madrid in the Bernabeu en route. He earned the nickname that always stuck, El Tel. The following season, he took them to the final of the European Cup, where they faced Steaua Bucharest. It would have been Barcelona's first ever European Cup triumph, but it all went wrong. Barca's finest froze and missed every penalty in the shootout after a goalless draw. I signed for him shortly after that and came to a city in mourning, but distraught as Terry was, you wouldn't have known. For someone that played for some of the game's greatest coaches, I can honestly say that I think he was the best. He was thoughtful, innovative and brave. We missed out narrowly for the title, and 4 games into the following season he was ludicrously fired. Patience is not a virtue at clubs like Barcelona. It was a sad farewell, but we were to meet again when he signed me for Spurs. We had some great times, including my favourite ever moment in football, winning the FA Cup, which included a tactical master plan on the way against Arsenal in the first ever FA Cup semi-final to be played at Wembley. He went on, of course, to manage England and took them so close to glory in Euro 96 with Alan and co. And after finishing his coaching career, we were to work together. We were to work together again, both for the BBC and latterly Al Jazeera's Champions League coverage, where I first started to notice something of a decline in his well-being. So many wonderful football memories, but El Tel was never one to stick to football. He was a fascinating man who delved into business, wrote books and had numerous interests. He was fascinating, he was charming, he was tough, he was witty, he was charismatic. He was Terry, and every player loved him. It's a very, very sad day, Alan.
Yeah, incredibly sad. I mean, it's getting emotional listening to you reading off his achievements and how great he was. And I know we use that word great many times, but Terry really was great. He really was special. What made him special is because he belonged in football. He belonged to everyone, because with all the huge names that played for him, over the last, 5 or 6 hours, I've been sat reading and listening to so many people speak about him, and everyone, bar none, is just saying how great he was and how nice he was, how special he was, how ahead of his time he was. And that was, that's the big thing for me is that we go on, and rightly so, about Pep and about Klopp, we went on about Wenger and about all these great coaches. But Terry had all of that. Terry had a plan and another plan. If for every eventuality, Terry was, for me, the first one that sort of taught me how to press. Was the guy who was playing different systems in games and 3 or 4 different systems in games, whereas we rightly get hugely excited now about managers and coaches doing that in the modern day game. Terry did that 25, 30 years ago. So, yeah, it's as bad as it's been a terrible day and a really emotional day, because honestly, I loved the guy. I thought he was amazing and I owed him so much. And it has been nice listening and watching all the really, really positive comments about him.
I'll start with you first. Gary, do you have any personal stories that you can tell us about to let us know a bit more about him as a person?
Very much so, Micah. I had a special relationship with him in the sense that it was unique because I went to Barcelona. I signed at the same time as Mark Hughes. And I suppose because we were all British, Mark was Welsh, obviously, I think he wanted to look after us more. And we became firm friends. And I think that's really unusual, that kind of relationship with a player and a manager. It's very distant. I would go for lunch and often dinner 2-3 times a week with him. Mark Hughes would come along. My wife and Mark's then girlfriend Jill would be with us as well. And you don't get that ever. I mean, that's very, very different. And I always wondered whether that was awkward for him a little bit. It didn't seem to bother any of the Barcelona players that were there, but I got to know him really well as a person, which is quite unusual with a player-manager relationship. And but the thing was, when we go for these lunches, and actually I got a glass of Rioja because we always shared a bottle, and we'd just talk football. But the thing is with Terry, where he was unique, is that he wouldn't just talk football, but he would push you and he would think of things. And often we'd sit there and he'd go, when the ball's on the right, and maybe if you were in that position there and then you went to the left a little bit and then you'd spin to the right and you'd make that run, do you think that, you might get a little bit of space? And sometimes I'd go, yeah, I'm not sure it would quite work. But he would think of things all the time. And then he'd say something and I'd go, actually, that might just work. And it did often. And he massively improved me as a player. Now, you know what it's like, both of you. With most managers, you get a little bit of individual input, but not to those levels because most managers, they'll come in, they have a way of playing, you'll set up in training, you go through the shape and all those kind of things, which he always did as well, obviously, because he was very kind of innovative in his training and stuff like that. But he'd also pull players out individually all the time, saying about this aspect of your game and that aspect of your game. And I think that was unique certainly amongst the managers that I played in, but probably helped a little bit by the friendship that we built. Now, when I later signed for him at Tottenham, it was slightly different. I don't think you could have that relationship with a manager when all the players, I don't think that would have gone down too well. I'd love to know what the Barcelona players thought at the time and how much they knew about how close we were. But yeah, lots of things that, he would try things in training. For example, he suddenly had this idea halfway through the season. He said, what would happen if when we're defending corners, why don't we leave just 3 defenders in the box and push everyone else up? And we were all going, you what? Really? He said, well, what would they do? What would they do? Would they still put loads of players over, or would they then shift everybody back and defend? So we spent a week doing this in training. And in the end, he decided against it because it was too dangerous, because you'd end up 4 against 3 in the box, and that's a bit of a threat at corners. But that kind of innovative thinking and always trying things and pushing things was something that Terry did all the time.
I think I've been lucky enough to work with some great managers and great coaches in my career. but he was a genius at both. He was a brilliant, an unbelievable man manager, because when you look at some of the strong characters he had to deal with in our England squad, captains in their own right, when you talk about Stuart Pearce, David Platt, Tony Adams, David Seaman, Paul Ince, myself, Gary Neville. I mean, all of these guys who you can imagine all had really strong opinions. But Terry had the authority, and everyone respected him that much that he came into the room and you could see everyone sort of with their eyes wide up and listening to what his next idea was, or his next system was going to be, because it was amazing, because the way he sort of handled everyone differently. I mean, there's a saying that, you got to treat everyone the same in the dressing room. No, he treated everyone as they needed to be, because they all had their individual needs. You know, can you imagine, how do you manage Gaza? I mean, how do you get the best out of Gaza? Him being a genius in himself. But Gaza loved him that much, because I mean, he let him get away with little things, but he could also give him the biggest in front of the group, and Gaza would, and then he would sort of turn around and give a little wry smile to the rest of the group, thinking, right, I've put him in his place, and it's someone else's turn here. But honestly, he was a genius at both, and he had the great knack of making or having his training sessions so enjoyable that you work your socks off without actually knowing it. And then, everyone just bloody loved him. He was such a nice guy. And
he did have a tough side, though, to him.
To sit down with time with him and listen to his ideas and his methods and everything else. And that night in Euro 96 against Holland was, I've been in some team meetings in my time, but he had a plan for every scenario. If they do this, then we go into that. If they do this, then we go into this shape and we go into that system. And again, everyone was sort of wide-eyed looking at it, thinking, and it worked to perfection. I mean, it was just unbelievable how it unfolded, and the atmosphere. And he created that atmosphere in the squad. There's no doubt about it, because we all know what went on in Hong Kong and China before Euro 96.
The dentist
and he
chair.
used that to his advantage, and we've said it before that we knew that we'd let one hell of a coach down and a manager, and one we'd all loved. So, but he used that in a way that we then had to go out and help him and sort of look after him and go out and put some performances in to help repay that. And he was a genius, honestly a genius at coaching and man management.
Yeah, he had a tough side as well, which I witnessed a couple of occasions. I've told stories on here about when after the Italia 90, after the World Cup, and I was pretty exhausted, and we didn't get much time off before the season started again, because we went all the way and played in the third place playoff, and came in, started training, and I talked about we had the cross country run where we had to do 3 laps of the training ground, which was quite a long way. And on the first lap, because I was terrible at long distance running, I jumped behind a bush. It's something I actually regretted quite quickly afterwards, and waited till the next lap and then joined them. I still finished last, but I think someone grassed me up, and he got me into his office, and he went, oh, come on, you're better than that. And he did it in a way that made me feel bad, and I felt guilty that I'd let him down. But and it was interesting you talked about Gaza there, Alan, because handling Gaza is not easy. He's great to have on your side because he's an unbelievable footballer, but an incredibly lovable personality. But he's difficult because he's a loose cannon. And the way he handled him, I always used to hear them, didn't they used to say he wouldn't have had the problems in life he had if he'd have gone to Manchester United and Sir Alex Ferguson. And I understand why people say that, but I totally disagree, because the way he handled, he got the best out of Gaza. In that run-up, when I talked about it in my little introduction there, that we played in the when we went all the way to Wembley and played in the final, where of course one of Gaza, he kind of self-imploded, didn't he, in that first few minutes, and kicked out a couple of times, got himself injured with a terrible knee injury. But on the build-up to that final, all the way through, Gaza was unbelievable. He carried us through. I think there was a game against, I think it might have been Portsmouth away. I think we were 1 down. He scored 2 unbelievably good goals. One might have been a header, which was quite unusual for Gaza. And then I talked about the tactical master plan when we played Arsenal in the semi-final. Now, Arsenal had already won the league. Obviously, it's Tottenham, Arsenal, North London derby, first time it had ever been played at Wembley. Massive game. They were huge favourites to beat us. Huge favourites. And he came up and we completely changed. He played me up front on my own, and he played like a 5 in midfield. And it just worked. And we kind of destroyed them. We beat them 3-1. We went through, got the final, and then Gaza did that thing in the final, got himself injured. He was carried off. He was lucky, to be honest, not to get a red card, but he was carried off anyway with this terrible injury, and he was taken off to hospital. And after the game, we were desperate to go out and obviously celebrate, and we had a little event planned and stuff. And Terry said, no, Gaza got us to this final, and he got us all on the bus, and we went to the hospital and visited Gaza.
Wow, yeah.
And that sort of thing. I talked before about when my eldest son George, when he was at the time he was only a couple of months old and he had leukemia. First person I called to tell was Terry Venables. He said, "Right, I'm picking you up in the morning. I'm taking you to the hospital." So it was that kind of, he was not only just a great coach, but he cared about you and he cared about his players. And those are the memories that will always stick with me.
I mean, I put on social media at lunchtime about I owe him so much.
I saw it.
I mean, I owe him my England career because you know it before. I hadn't, leading up to Euro '96, I hadn't scored for 2 years in all those friendlies when he was appointed England manager. I mean, I went to interview him many years back in Spain at his hotel in Spain, and that was one of the first things I said. I said to him about me not scoring for 2 years. He said, "Yeah, tell me about it. I remember it really well." And
but what was it? What was he saying to you at that time, though, Alan? Because you talk about years later, and we've mentioned you two, and it's so beautiful to listen to you two talk about him in such a way. But in them difficult moments, a lot of people will want to know, what was he saying to you back then?
Do you know what he was saying to me? He said to me, "I don't care whether you score in the next 5 or 6 friendlies. You are scoring every single week for your club. I don't care whether you score for England in the next 5 or 6 friendlies. What I'm going to say to you is that you will be my number 1 centre forward in that first game in Euro '96. And I just thought, wow, Jesus. For him to put his neck on the line, to have that much belief in me when all the other forwards, they were coming into the team and scoring, and I just couldn't score for England. It was just one of those things. And Andy Cole and Ian Wright and Les Ferdinand and all of these brilliant centre forwards, Robbie Fowler, they were all scoring. And I'm thinking, for that man to say to me, "Yeah, you will be my number 1 centre forward in the first game. Then the rest is up to you." And I just looked at him. I thought, I cannot let you down. I mean, for him to have that much belief in me, I just thought, wow, he's got that much belief in me, and he feels that strongly that I'm going to go in and do the business for him, when it would have been so easy for him to say, "No, you know what? I've got other forwards and I'm going to give them an opportunity," etc. And then, what happened after that? I scored in the first game, and then it got better from then on. So that's what I meant when I mean I owe him, because I think another manager might have said, "You know what? Someone else's turn." And then if they had I don't know what would have happened after that.
I must say, this one, it did hit me quite hard. I mean, as you get older, people that you've played with or people that you've played under, sadly die. I was thinking today, I think of all the managers that I played for, I think there's only one that's still alive, and that's Gordon Milne, who managed me at Leicester. It's, Jock Wallace, he's gone, who was really great for me. Then Howard Kendall at Everton, who meant a lot, even though I was only there a year. And obviously Terry Venables at 2 different clubs, and even with England, Bobby Robson, sadly, who's just a wonderful human being, and Graham Taylor. So, but I must say, I suppose because of that unusual personal connection with Terry, I found it difficult this morning. I was really upset, and I did a live thing on BBC News, and I was really struggling actually at certain times. I hadn't seen him because I think he was kind of protected a little bit over the last few years. I think I had lunch with him about probably 5 years ago with a couple of friends, and we reminisced, and he was in great form. But it is a tough one. We'll talk a little bit more about him, but let's take a short break. Welcome back to The Rest is Football with Micah Richards, Alan Shearer and myself, Gary Lineker. We're paying tribute to the late, great Terry Venables, someone that was hugely important and significant to both Alan and myself. And I believe he was Steve McLaren's number 2 when you were in the squad, Micah, but I can't see Terry as a number 2, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, he was such a lovely person. Obviously, I've not got the same stories that you two would have, but he just had that warmness about him. He would always be honest. He would just always say to me, go out there and give it 100%. Believe in your ability and the rest to take care of itself. So he was just sort of that, and it's sort of difficult for him being a top manager and being an assistant. It was sort of... Yeah, it was sort of like when Liverpool had Roy Evans and Gerard Houllier. You respect both of them. McLaren was a great coach, but obviously Venables was a great manager. So it's where do you get your advice from? So that was a little bit strange at times. But as for a person that he was, yeah, you couldn't ask for a better person in the short time I shared with him.
He was such a... he was such a lad as well, though, wasn't he, Gary? Yeah. Although he was your manager and your coach, you knew that you could. I mean, after those games, in Euro '96, and we had a game 4 or 5 days later, but such was the strength in the squad that we got back to the hotel at 11 o'clock at night, 11 at night, and of course no one can sleep, so we're all sat in the bar till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then all of a sudden training's been moved from 10 o'clock until 1 o'clock. And Terry was there with us, he'd sat and have a glass of wine with us, and we'd all end up having a sing-song, and he was all part of it, and that's why we all sort of loved him, because he wasn't aloof, but we all knew how far we could push him. Yeah. And he had his limit, and I think that's the great sign of a manager, just being that respected and that liked, but also being able to step away and be as serious if he wanted to be.
He was like a cheeky Cockney as well, wasn't he? But he actually loved to sing song, didn't he? He loved to sing. He was not bad.
Didn't he have his club? He had Scribes.
Scribes, yeah. He used to go there, and he used to have a sing. And I'm pretty sure he sang on television once. He also wrote like a fiction novel, I think. Was it Hazel? Hazel, that was the character in the book. So he had all sorts of strings to his bow. I mean, talking about another story when I used to love playing cricket and played, throughout my football career, mainly in the summer. But when I was at Tottenham, I lived in St John's Wood, and just down the road from Lords, and I used to play for a club that played just in September, but they played nearly every day. So it's during the seasons, but because they played in midweek, Cross Arrows, that's what they were called. And used to play on the nursery ground at Lords. And I used to go, and I was a batsman. And I'd keep wicket as well, but I didn't keep wicket during the season because it's obviously quite strenuous. But I played in this game, we batted, and then they were chasing the runs down. But it was one of those games that was going to peter out into a draw. No one was going to win it. And the captain of the side says, Gary, why don't you have a bowl? And I went, no, I don't bowl, never bowl, right? So he went, oh, go on, have a bit of fun. And they talked me into it. And I ran in and I bowled about 3 balls. And then the 4th ball, I lifted up my side, bowled. And I went, twang, muscle went in my side. And it was a Thursday. 2 days. I can't remember who it might have been Aston Villa or someone we were playing. I've gone, oh no. And I thought, hope it's not much. And I woke up in the morning, I could barely move. And I thought, oh God. So I thought, what do I do? Do I tell the truth or do I make something up? And I thought, I can't lie to Terry. I can't lie to Terry Venables. And I came in the morning, I went to his office and I went, Terry, I've got a problem. What is it? I said, I've hurt my side. I just like, my muscle, it's like really, I don't know. And he went, how did you do it? I went, I was playing cricket and I was bowling. He says, you were what? I said, yeah, I was, yeah. And he went, that's it, you and your cricket. He said, that's it, no more cricket. You're never playing again, that's it, finished. I went, no, come on. I said, what about if I never bowl again? And Terry being Terry, he went, all right, go on then. He said, but make sure you play on Saturday. and I kind of got through the game and played it, and it was, you know, that kind of magic kind of formula that he had that made you want to run through a brick wall for him.
He was too strong for the FA, wasn't he? Because I mean, there's no way a man of his ability and his coaching nous and everything else that he came with and brought to the table for England. Which is why it was so devastating as well, you know, after the semi-final in Euro '96. It was like, yeah, it was really tough to take because we all knew how great he was and no one wanted him to leave. And I know Glenn Hoddle came in and Glenn was a brilliant coach as well, in my opinion. But Terry was it was very, very, very special.
Yeah, the thing about, if you look back at Terry Venables' career, and he's obviously, it was amazing, particularly as a manager. But if you look at it, there's 2 penalty shootouts, you know, and the difference between him being regarded, I think, across the board as being a great. If he'd have won those 2, one would have been Barcelona's first ever. Imagine that, first ever European Cup / Champions League win. And England in the Euros, and I'm pretty confident you would have won the final. Czech Republic, wasn't it, that Germany beat in the final? I'm pretty sure he would have won the 2. And I know, and I've had conversations with him that you know, those were the things that he'd looked back on and thought, if only, and it would have made such a massive difference. Just those kind of fractions, isn't it?
I said that to him when I was with him in Spain a few years back when I interviewed him. I said, you know, if we had won that tour, it would have been Sir Terry Venables. He went, oh, stop it, don't start.
Sir Eltel,
yeah. Genius, absolute genius.
I remember he was when at Barcelona, he could because obviously, you know, his Spanish actually was pretty good. It was pretty good. But he always felt more comfortable in his big team talks during the training sessions. But he always had a translator called Graham Turner, because of the way Spanish is pronounced. They used to call him Graham, who was a brilliant interpreter. He could do Catalan, he could do Spanish, and he was brilliant. And sometimes in the team meetings, I could see Terry would deliver kind of, I don't know, a minute of tactics and this and that and the other. And then Graham would stop and he would do it word for word. I mean, I'd studied it hard, Spanish, and I was thinking, God, he's good. And every single time you could see that after about 30 seconds, he was going, come on, Graham, come on, Graham, get on with it. It was like, because he just wanted to get over his point of view, and that translation thing just frustrated him. But he was massively respected as a coach by the Barcelona players. He was much loved in that city as well for what he did. And that first season when he came in, I can't remember whether it was like 3, 4 or 5-0 they won in the Bernabeu. They definitely gave them a good tonking. It was before I arrived, but and they walked the league that first season. Then we suffered a couple of really serious injuries to 2 of the best players. One, I think, he'd finished his career. But But I know that particularly that final of the European Cup, because it was meant to be their time. I mean, it's Steaua Bucharest. It was in Spain somewhere. It might have been Seville. I can't quite remember because I wasn't at the club at the time. But 120 minutes 0-0, and it didn't quite happen for them. But overall, what a man, what a career.
Here. Sadly missed, and we all loved him.
Yeah, we did.
It's been outstanding hearing you two's tributes, Unfortunately, I can't contribute as much as you two, but you've literally walked me through start to finish, and it's been amazing to hear the tribute, So thank you for that. And I'm sure everyone really would appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. Before we finish, just like to say to Yvette and Terry's family, sincerest condolences. He'll be much missed, and we send you all our thoughts and our love. Well said. Yeah. So this is obviously slightly different episode than we normally put out on a Monday. We're going to do our review of the Premier League weekend further down the week on our Wednesday episode. But we wanted to give proper respect to Terry Venables. We'll miss him.